It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
If you want to master preparing your portfolio for the next downturn, not only do you have safety under control, and not only do you have to master self-control, you have to also understand your strategy. Your third S is strategy.
And this is what's going to get you through the turbulence of on your long-term navigation to financial independence and wealth. You have to have some tools there to get you through this, because if you just let yourself go with the raw emotions, I think you're going to come up short. So that's why we've tried to create what are things that we can help you understand, or tools that you can equip yourself with to make it through this. And the first one is diversification.
That's right. Essentially, when we don't know what an outcome is going to be, we don't know which way the markets are going to be, we don't know what the top performing asset classes or the bottom performing asset classes are going to be, so that we are never 100% wrong, we diversify so that we can be a majority right instead of a majority wrong, and we try to do it that way. Well, why do we even have diversification inside of our portfolio? There are two main reasons. One of those reasons is for return enhancement. We buy more aggressive things because we think that it'll have a higher rate of return. It'll boost the rate of return of the whole portfolio. Or the second reason is risk mitigation, volatility reduction. If the market does go down, if we do see that downturn, we want some stuff in our portfolio that's going to have a stable base. Yeah. So I either want it to enhance my return, or I want it to minimize the volatility. And we think that one of the best illustrations out there to be able to see how this plays out in true form is the Callan periodic table. They release this every year, and we just pulled a snippet of one from 2001 until 2020. And what you can see is if you pick any color on this chart, maybe you pick the blue large cap, because that's what people say all the time. I'm just going to put everything in the S&P 500. And I think the reason a lot of people say that is over the past decade, it would have worked out pretty well for you. If you look, it was the top performing asset class, or at least the top 2 or 3 over the last decade. But if you rewind a little bit further back, Brian, back to the early 2000s, leading up to the Great Recession, large cap still did really, really well, but it was not the top performing asset class.
Well, I pick on you. We were talking about this in the content meeting, is that I brag about the fact that from really 2000 all the way through probably after the great, recession of 2008, the S&P 5, I mean, that was good. Don't get me wrong. It's a good return. But my diversified portfolios were smoking the S&P 500. Yep. And I pick on you about that a little bit, and the fact, and the reason I also bring it up is it reminds me of 1998, where the S&P 500 back then was making people look stupid, meaning that diversification made you feel like you were standing still, even if you were making 12 or 13 or 14% annually with your diversified portfolio. And years that the S&P 500 was making 28%, if you were a prudent financial advisor, your clients are looking at you like, why are we not in the S&P 500? And completely, instead of just having it be 40, 50% of the portfolio. The same thing potentially could be going on right now because the last 10 years, there has been nothing that does as good. If you look at just the visual here, and I'll just tell you for people who listen to this on the podcast side, pretty much from 2011 all the way through 2020, the S&P 500 is in the top 3 of these 8 holdings that we've got displayed here. So it is bopping around between the best to the top 3. It's on the podium every year. That's something just to be mindful of when you think about reversion to the mean. I mean, there's always potential that might not be the case 10 years from now. So we love diversification.
So what we think is when it comes to portfolio design and implementing a strategy that makes a lot of sense for your specific situation, you want to make sure that you have the right diversification in place. You want to make sure that you have the right mix of assets so that whether over the next year the market goes up 20%, or goes down 20%, you're going to feel comfortable in that portfolio. We see it far too often that folks get really, really excited at that point of euphoria, and we get these phone calls. The market's done really, really well. We'll get clients that call us and say, hey, why don't we kick the risk up a notch? Why don't we're like, no, because if you remember 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, that last time we saw that downturn, you were the first phone call I got saying, guys, what's going on?
You're a scaredy cat.
You're a scaredy cat. You have to be true to yourself to know what portfolio makes the most sense, because ultimately, remember, if you're going to walk up that mountain with a yo-yo, You have to keep walking. If you sit down, if you freak out and take your yo-yo off your finger and sit down and stop moving up that mountain, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to be able to stay in the market to actually be able to participate in that long-term growth.
Before we close out the third S, strategy, I think it's also important to say another tool to help take away the emotion is dollar cost averaging.
Oh,
This
that's a
can
huge
work
one.
in multiple ways. First of all, if you're a person that's just working, and you have your employer retirement plan, which is, by the way, one of the easiest ways to build a 7-figure portfolio is to actually participate in your work retirement plan. It's kind of nice and it shelters you. You might even have a financial mutant moment when you know the month's coming to a close, your monthly investment into your retirement plan is going in. You kind of find yourself cheering for the market to go down on those days that it buys. That's a financial mutant moment, by the way. But I also think it helps you if you're a person that maybe you had a windfall. You had some cash come your way. You sold some real estate. You sold a business. Or just a decent chunk of money came in, but you're in a marketplace like we are today where the market's at an all-time high, and you're like, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines and wait for this to get much cheaper. You might find, as we've seen in a lot of those charts that we've covered in the past, what happens if you're sitting there 2 years later going, man, why did the market not fall as much as I did? Yeah, it went down 3% in this week or 6%, but it never went down that 25%. I was kind of waiting to get my 25% off coupon. We find that dollar cost averaging can also be a great tool for getting into markets because remember, and I tried to talk to the content team because I felt like there should have been some illustration. There are some strange bedfellows when it comes to investing because volatility, surprisingly, is an incredible opportunity that, you don't want to, it's almost like you should be cheering for it if you have 20 years to go before you retire. You actually should be somewhat a contrarian and excited because that means you're buying in more shares at lower prices. And then when we have the recovery, which we will always have the recovery, your shares that you bought on the cheap get so much more valuable. That's why I love just kind of driving through all market situations.
Now, if we were all rational investors, or if we were all just rational human beings in general, we'd all be incredibly wealthy and super healthy, right? Like if we made rational decisions, those two things would happen. So oftentimes when it comes to finances, we acting on our own accord don't always make rational decisions. So sometimes one part of your strategy, one part of mastering that third S to be prepared for the next downturn might be to get a CoPilot. It might be to get someone to help you navigate that market. I can't tell you how many folks who've reached out and said, hey, you know what? I've done really well, but I got to start working with somebody because, in that last downturn, I went to cash.
Well,
I just freaked out and I got scared. I feel like if I would have had someone there, someone in my corner, someone to help, maybe I would not have made the decision that I made.
You just said it. Someone in your corner. Because the next quote we have is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's kind of the whole Mike Tyson quote. And look at that picture. That man was a beast of a dude. I think he could still take both of us. But it is one of those things where, Iron Mike was, he's hitting on something pretty powerful there, is that everybody has a plan. A lot of you do-it-yourselfers have a plan. But I'm going to tell you, when you are getting closer to retirement, when you've created that 7-figure portfolio, you are going to start going, when this next downturn happens,
it's going to feel a little different.
It's going to feel a lot different, especially if you're approaching retirement in the next 5 to 7 years. You're going to want that good corner person to kind of help you navigate what's coming so you can avoid the blind spots. You just don't know what you don't know. That's when a CoPilot is going to help, and that plan it's going to help you with the well-designed plan too, because that's the part that kind of closes out the 3 S's. Have a plan to drive through no matter what comes your way. You've done the hard work, you've done the preparation. Now you just need to see it through to reach financial success.